Hi everybody and welcome. My name is Debbie. Really great to see you all here today. I'll be talking a little bit today on the impact of underperformance and absenteeism, and is it always just about knowledge and skill? Is it or isn't it? That's the question. I'd like to share a little bit of my background before we get going on, around as to what brought me to talking about absenteeism and underperformance. When we have underperformance and absenteeism, we generally automatically go to conventional performance coaching, address the areas that we see as underperformance, and we negotiate our way around absenteeism using the tools that we have. There's around 47 odd different types of coaching tools out there, but most of them, if not all of them, focus on one part or another of performance, the actual coaching tool of performance, and focuses more on pure performance. Now, my background is over the last 12 years, I've sort of been more involved with people around depression, anxiety that are coming to us because they're just nothing out there in the arena of therapy, coaching, different arenas. It's just not working. People have come to us wanting to come off pills, wanting to come off medical footprints that they don't want. And it was through this background that I came to looking at underperformance and absenteeism in the business. I can work with clients, I've worked with many, many clients, and not only in the area of depression, but taking that depression into the workplace, people I found were finding they couldn't work anymore. They were taking time off, which was creating absenteeism, obviously, in the workplace. They were also finding that they weren't able to actually work properly in their work environment. Excuse me. And I can work one person at a time. I only have an X number of hours, as we all have in a day. And having just those few hours, I could only help a certain number of people, and I couldn't do any more. So I looked at it and I thought, how can I help more people get what I do? Because what I do is extremely unique. I know this is true because I know who developed and designed it, and we've only trained a handful of people that are actually using this process and product that I'm going to talk to you about today. And if I want to help more people, the best way for me to do that is to train other people to do what I do. And the best place to start is work, because we all have to go to work. We all have to then go home. We all have lives. Work isn't who we are. Work is what we do in order to get through this journey of life. So I looked at it and I went, right, okay, how can I help more people? And so I came to the decision that helping companies help their staff was probably, for me, the best way of doing it, because when we address underperformance, is it knowledge and skill only? Well, that's the million-dollar question. Is it or is it not? Now, I know a lot of people have heard of performance coaching, and I'd have no doubt a lot of people have actually experienced some form of performance coaching in one way or another, whether it's sports performance, whether it's business performance, whether it's workplace. Performance coaching has always been out there. Today, what I'd like to introduce you to is to emotional transition coaching. I'm quite sure that people have heard of coaching, performance coaching. You may even have heard of transition coaching. But I can guarantee you, with a high level of confidence, as I said, I know how many people we've trained that are practicing in the country. I know that there's not an awful lot of people that may have actually experienced emotional transition coaching. And I'm hoping that at some point by now you'd be asking, I wonder what emotional transition coaching is. Now, there is a lot of information that I could share. However, with the time frames that we have today, I'm going to share with you as much as I can, and I'd really, really like to hear from anyone who'd like to hear any more, tweaks a bit of an interest, and what is it? It's going to really be about how we take conventional performance coaching to the next level. Because coaching really is just a process that aims to improve performance. We know this. And it focuses really on the here and now rather than working in the distant past, which is where a lot of our problems sit. It does maybe work towards the future, preparing you for the future, but it's all based on what we call transactional change. Okay, so what is coaching really about? Coaching is really about raising and building awareness empowering choice, and helping to lead to some form of change. And it's really predominantly aimed at behavioural change. Coaching looks to unlock a person's potential to really maximise their performance. Like I've said, it doesn't matter what area of performance, it's generally all performance coaching. So whether you're a sportsman, whether you're a business, whether you are in your personal capacity with some kind of problems maybe, it's all really some form of performance coaching. A good coach will generally help you get clearer about your goals and your dreams and help you to become clearer around what you're capable of achieving. And they should generally push you to consider maybe other options, other ways of thinking and looking at things just differently. And maybe in performance coaching, adjusting behaviours and maybe ways of thinking for you to expand on what you've already got, what's already in your toolbox. What you generally notice that all these types of coaching are knowledge and skill based. You can get as much knowledge as you want. If you want to do something new, there's a skill that you want to do. You get some more knowledge. You develop the knowledge. You develop the skill, and by doing that, that's knowledge based and skill, and you will end up with different results depending on where you take it. But all of them are based on knowledge and skill. Okay. Coaching should aim to produce optimal performance, again, specifying skills and goals. There are some areas where that kind of coaching is absolutely perfect and works a right treat. But there are some areas that it's just not quite reaching. It's not giving people the full potential that they're looking for. Something is just holding them back. And what is it? In general performance coaching, they don't have the tools to actually work that out. So you ask yourself, right, well, if you've got performance coaching and it helps to develop skills, develop goals, what's exactly the problem? Well, as a coach, the last thing you want to do is take away an individual's opportunity to think for themselves or for their personal responsibility and ownership. So the problem really lies in what I call transformational change. So the difference between transactional and transformational. People can look at transformation and go, well, I've done some coaching, it was great, and I actually have changed, so therefore it's transformational change. I'm talking about transformational change at a much deeper level. It's not just a coping strategy or a management skill. I'm looking at something that's a little bit different. For performance to evolve and to develop, there needs to be some sort of really deep-seated change. So where knowledge and skill equals a result, which isn't rocket science, there are some areas where there's just like a block. Transactional change really addresses cognitive ability. Like I said, you can learn anything, you can acquire a new skill, you can develop that skill, and you can get yourself some really good results. At some point, there might be something, though, that stops you in your tracks, and you know you want more, if you're just not getting there, and you can't quite work it out. If you want this kind of change, then what you need to look at is something else that we call emotional transition coaching, and that works in a different area altogether. Emotional transition coaching works around the area of values, beliefs, and identity. Now, this is an area that not very many people address, and especially when addressing underperformance and absenteeism, they don't look at those kind of things. A lot of people shy away from this area for a number of reasons, of which two would be they look at it as being in the domain of the health professionals, and they also look at it as being in the domain of mental health. Now, the question is it? In some instances, yep, I can accept the reasoning behind it. Yeah, it could be in that area. My experience, though, is that there are a high percentage of folk that are out there that, given the right coaching tool, these areas can be addressed outside of the health professional arena. And that is emotional transition coaching. Values are the domain of the emotions. And negative emotions are the emotions that will prevent us from moving forward every day of the week. We're talking emotions like fear, anxiety, sadness. Positive emotions this isn't the area for positive emotions, because it's not the positive emotions that are going to hold you back. It's the negative emotions that are going to hold you back and stop you moving forward. And it doesn't matter whether you're moving forward in a relationship, whether you're moving forward in the workplace, whether you're moving forward in the sports arena. If you're in a good space, think about it for yourself. You're driving down the road and you're feeling really happy. Today's been a really great day, and somebody cuts you off, and you just kind of go, wow, maybe someone's in hospital. I don't know, maybe someone's having a baby in the back seat. You don't know. You tend to just go with it and you're okay. Just let them in and off you go. Conversely, if you're having a really bad day and you're feeling a bit negative on the inside, something could have happened at home, doesn't matter, but you're running a negative emotion. Let someone cut you off in the middle of the road and see how you respond. I can guarantee you that it's not going to be, oh, blimey, I wonder if somebody's, in the back having a baby, or somebody's had a fall or whatever. You're going to be going off your head. And I know that's true because I've experienced it. I've been there and I've seen it. So it's not the positive emotions we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the negative emotions. This is what's going to help create underperformance as it's known and what it's called. When dealing with emotions, yes, you do need specific skills, and you don't need to be a doctor. So I'm not a doctor, I'm putting it out there, and I will probably repeat myself a couple of times through this talk. I'm not a doctor, I just know what I've worked with over the last 12 years. Okay, so yes, dealing with emotions, you do need a specific skill, and a lot of people avoid it because going into that, they push it off to mental health, they avoid it in performance coaching, and you'll end up going in another direction. But the best that a performance coach can do is transactionally change your behavior. But unfortunately, sometimes you do need the emotions changed. You can coach a person's performance so the organization gets what they want, the coachee gets what they're after, but do they actually get what they need? Because values drive beliefs, and these create personal identity. So if you want to help change that, and this isn't about how to change you as a person, this is about changing you to become the person who you are, not the identity that you've taken on, which we will discuss as we go along, the different masks that we wear in the different arenas that we're in. I know for myself, I've had a time in my life where in the workplace I wore this mask. In a personal life I did this, but in personal life, what I was like with my family was one face, what I was like with one set of friends was like that, with another set of friends, so that I could actually fit into all of these different arenas. If you're in a number of arenas, keep changing those masks. It can be quite entertaining, actually. So if you want to change any of those, if you change values, you change beliefs, and you ultimately change an identity. And like I said, this isn't changing you as a person. This is getting rid of some of the negative stuff and allow the real authentic you to come forward. That's what we're really looking at. Due to stigma and judgment, people tend to stay away from the kind of treatment that lands them up in health professional arenas and within the mental health. And this then lands up with the conflicts between what do we want to achieve, what do we have to achieve in order to keep our job, and what we can do to get help. And it's made more difficult when you actually don't have a clue what the driving force is, what is driving and what is packing behind all of this. Another reason that people tend to avoid going into the mental health therapy, health professional arena is that they tend to get left with the mental health footprint, and that can potentially follow them for the rest of their lives. So as an example, there was a gentleman who had a dream of joining the RAF. Unfortunately, in his earlier days, things weren't going really according to plan because the relationships he was in were not really supportive of him doing that. So he let it go. Later on in life, he had a more supportive support system. His home life was far more supportive, and the environment more supported his ability now to join the RAF Reserves because he was a lot older. However, due to having suffered from depression in the past, it stopped him almost literally straight away in his tracks. So even though he hadn't had treatment for years, he had his ups and downs like the rest of us, you have days where you're not good, days where you're good, maybe a week or so, whatever. But because of that footprint of the depression all those years ago, he couldn't join the RAF. So with only a year left to go for him to be able to join, that dream was going to remain just that, the dream, unfortunately. Now, many people suffer with depression and have a label for it. They're labelled. Go to any doctor, any professional health, mental health, you get a label. That then becomes a footprint. However, conversely, many of us also have down days, down weeks even, unhappy, sad, life happens, but we have no label for it. So what does that actually mean? Does that mean that the label, the less effective, and the unlabeled, the more effective? Does that mean that we can trust one and not the other? Or does it mean something different, which when we consider with a different pair of eyes, it's something else? What would happen if it merely meant that the nervous system hadn't quite caught up with the conscious system? Labels mean nothing, okay? You can meet someone, you don't know they've got a label, and they're absolutely fine. The minute you tell them there's a label, suddenly the way we think just doesn't think differently. That's how our brains work. With the correct coaching tool, we can address this without the need for mental health labeling or a lasting footprint or a stigma. And like I said, for the record, I'm not a doctor. I've just been in this area for over 12 years, and my experience is that a lot of things, and I'm not saying that depression is not real, it's 100% real. What I'm saying is that some of these things do not need to be placed at the door of mental health. They can be addressed outside of the system. I would rather see people address it this side of the system, and if for whatever reason it doesn't work, they can then go on to do the mental health. For me, I would rather let's see what we can do here first, and if we can't address it here, then feel free to go and get that, because if we can deal with it on this side, then people can be addressing their lives moving forward stigma-free and footprint-free. In my experience, the only people that what I do doesn't work for are people that have actually got a bigger reason to stay unwell than they have got to get better. So, for example, we worked within the arena of post-traumatic stress disorder. We're working with a group of six guys who were living in a house, and they all had PTSD. But the government was giving them £28,000 a year. They were able to act out the way they wanted to because they had a label. We have PTSD. They were able to make a lot of noise because they had these problems. They could just about do anything they want. One of the gentleman's wives was living just down the road, but he didn't have to be there. He could play drums until stupid o'clock in the morning. Didn't work for them. Why not? Because if they got well, they would have to now start doing something that they didn't really want to do. They were quite happy getting £28,000 a year off the government being sick, drinking up a storm. Suddenly they'd have to work, they'd have to be responsible, they'd have to take responsibility seriously like the rest of us. So these are the arenas where it doesn't work, where people want to be professional patients. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all get to choose. You have a choice. Even not making a choice is a choice. So we all have choice. And so in my experience, the only people it doesn't work for are the people that actually have a bigger reason not to get well than they have to get well. And performance coaching is no different. If you're getting a pat on the back and everyone is, poor you, oh, you're the victim, oh, this is such a terrible life, everything's against you. If that's the only bit of praise that you're getting, and as they say, a kiss is as good as a smack, then that's it. And I understand that. There again, it's choice. What we can do is offer people the opportunity for those different choices. So to better understand maybe the importance of addressing the negative emotions, let's explore something that's really fundamental to understanding how the past impacts your awareness. So here's a quick question. Has anyone, this is a question for you to ask yourself, maybe had a disproportionate, spontaneous reaction to something, you kind of blown up, flared up, and then wondered, flipping heck, why did I need a sledgehammer to swat the fly? It was a bit extreme, So let's have a look at what causes this potential sledgehammer effect. Okay, so what we have is what we call trigger driver behavior. That's just how it works. So you're at work, you've been asked to perform a task, and finding it a little bit difficult because the boss is sort of getting to you, is kind of getting under your skin and creating this negative response in you. This then drives the negative emotion, which is what you're feeling. Then this creates the maladaptive or problematic behavior. Now, in this area in work, this would be deemed to be underperformance. Underperforming, I'm not talking about, wrecking the place or whatever. I'm talking about you're not able to do this task or whatever it is that you've been set, and you're now down labeled as underperforming. The thing here is that the boss is the trigger of the emotion that drives this behavior, not able to do the task. We think that the problem is the boss, when in actual fact, it's got nothing to do with the boss. The boss is a reminder of something that is outside of your awareness, potentially. So if we look at it, from birth, we're all learning machines, okay? So in the ages sort of 0 to 7, we call these imprinting years. These are the years that you relate to those around you. Parents, your siblings, your caregivers, your grandparents. These are our imprinting year brackets. Then you've got 8 to 12. We call these the modelling years. Here we start to model others around us, maybe our friends' parents. We can start to model our parents, even though we've been imprinted on them as well. And everything that we see around us, we start to model it. Then between the ages of 13 and 18, these are becoming our adult years. And this is where we start becoming adults. And we start looking at these different things we've learned and building it and making it our own based on our perspective of what we've seen and what we've learned. Okay? So another way of looking at it, putting it into order. So imagine a lion cub, because it's just so much more fun to do so. Lion cub is born into the pride, and he has to learn how to be part of that pride, how to become a lion. I don't know how to catch food, how to survive, the pecking order, what's acceptable, what isn't acceptable. And with all of these, even in that kingdom, lessons will come with some kind of emotion, some positive and some negative. Just like the lion cub, we have the same kind of journey, learning to become an adult, okay? We have our learnings, who we are, what we are, how to live, what we need to do, how we survive. And in the same way, to those experiences, we attach either positive or negative emotions. We must also at this point recognize that perception plays a part too. So now we have the past with this whole pot of emotions, beliefs that we've created off that, different values, and all of this links to our identity. It's from this part of experience that in fact the emotion was triggered from creating this maladaptive behavior. So the boss was the trigger, okay? The fuse between the trigger, being the drive and the behavior, is short if it's that intense, if the emotions are that high. And this is the instance where between the trigger, the emotion, and the behavior comes out the sledgehammer. And before you've even had time to think, you don't even realize it, bam, it's gone. And everyone can experience that. And I'm sure there's a lot of us on the call today that potentially experience that, because I know I certainly have. Okay, so let's imagine now for a minute that the boss is the trigger. It's like a flame. And the past, the past experience with this sort of pot reaching emotions is a petrol tank. Just, as an analogy to make it easier to understand. If this past experience, this tank of petrol is that full, doesn't take much wiggling for the petrol to actually escape from this pot. And if it spills out, the trigger is the flame. When these two get together, what happens? It's just going to blow. Boom. That's exactly what's going to happen. So what we try and do, well, what we do here at Emotional Transition Coaching is we empty the petrol out of the petrol tank so that there's more wiggle room. And this then opens the gap between the trigger and the driver and the behavior, giving you more thinking time for you to go, bam, and then go, oh, okay, well, maybe readdress it and sort of neutralize. We look to neutralize those negative behaviors, those negative emotions. When we're in that position, we are better able to access the knowledge that we have. How many of you have had instances where you've just been really rattled and you know something, but you just cannot access that part of the information in your brain, and you're going, I know this, where is it? And then off you go, you're doing something else, and then the answers come to you. And that's because the emotion has subsided, you're no longer in that highly negative emotion state. And then when that knowledge suffers, obviously can't access it, but then so does the skill suffer, because you can't do the job because you can't access the knowledge, and it's kind of a knock-on effect. So if you think of all the times that you've been highly emotional, ask yourself, how easy was it for you to access all the knowledge that you know you have? And how easy was it to execute the skills that you know that you have? It's not something that you don't have where you just suddenly lost. And this also happens in the workplace. Our unconscious doesn't know the difference between work and home. It's one and the same, okay? So with emotional transition coaching, we work to reduce the petrol, the negativity. And by reducing the petrol in the tank, widening the gap between the trigger and the driver and the behavior, giving you more thinking time. That's basically in a nutshell. Another way of looking at things is if you were to, for example, look at an iceberg. Analogies are easier to understand. Only about 15% on average of an iceberg sits above the water. Below the waterline is 85%. So if we look at conventional coaching, that operates in the 15% above the waterline, around your knowledge, your skill, and ultimately your results. Okay. Working at this level, you get more knowledge, you build up your skill, and in this particular world, the theory basically is practice makes perfect. When in actual fact, practice makes permanent. And if you're not practicing it the way you want it, you will forever have a flawed outcome. Again, known as transactional change. So let's look at it and just talk about what's not being addressed. The 85% below the waterline, the part that drives the iceberg, in our case, our lives. In this area, this domain that lies below the waterline, we know that is transformational change. Herein lies the deep stuff. Now, I'm going to come back this again a little later and explain it a little bit more fully, but 2 million pieces of information comes into our nervous system every second of the day. That's a lot of information. It's around 80 gigabytes a day. So imagine for a minute that your whole body works like a ship. Our conscious mind is the captain. This is the part that leads us. We see where we're going, we hear, and we're consciously aware of all these things that are going on. Okay? And that seeing part is the 15% above the waterline. We can only process 134 bits of that information. And like I said, I'll explain a little bit more about that later on. Our body is being run by what we call the crew. Okay, 85% below the waterline. So the rest of that information of the 2 million bits coming in is taken care of by the 85% that is below the waterline. Now, has anyone here, just even in the time that we've been on here, had to go, oh my gosh, I haven't told my heart to beat, or I didn't remind myself to breathe? That is the domain of the crew. That is the 85% that happens outside of your awareness. Now, our ship is coming along, and the crew are doing their business, and the engine room rings up to the captain and says, we're running a bit low on fuel, we'll need to make a stop. The kitchen might ring up and say, I don't know, we're running out of salad leaves, we've got flipping a whole load of vegetarians on board, and it's really, really, really hot, everyone's eating salad. We need to make a stop and refuel and refill. The laundry room might phone and say, look, the crew, the ship's really full, there's been a lot because it's so hot, blah, 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 we're running out of laundry detergent. It is at this point that the captain then assesses, because that's his job, of which is the best point or port to stop at to do these refueling for the different areas that are required. Okay. So the 134 bits the captain relies on, and he gets the rest from the crew. All right. So actually, it's the crew that's really running the ship. The captain is the overview, the employer, the leader. So the employer has an eyes on everything, and it's the staff, the crew, that are actually running the show. So here's a question. Imagine this is the Titanic. What happened when the captain didn't listen to the crew? The workplace is no different. If we don't listen to our staff, what do you think is going to happen to our business? For great performance, we all need to work together. Values are where emotions are. Beliefs, what you believe about yourself, comes off the back of a value. And through the values and beliefs, you will create an identity about who you are. If you believe you can, or you believe you can't, you are right. And those beliefs are going to come from somewhere. Somewhere in your past, something has happened for you to either believe you can do it or believe you can't. Because we're all given the same opportunities. There might be different things. Each one of us have got different things going on. But how is it that one person can deal with it and another person can't? It's the same as the fear of spiders. Some people are afraid and some people are not. If it was a genuine fact, everybody would be afraid of spiders. The only one emotion we can't change, the one only true emotion, is love. It's a bit far out there, and a lot of people go, but if you really sit down and explore it, every other emotion you can get rid of, so therefore that means it can't be real. Because if it was real, everybody would be afraid of heights, everybody would be afraid of spiders, and the same conversely. So there are areas that develop from birth, and if not addressed, they can create massive problems in your life, work included. So the blind spot, what neither we nor the world know about us, and the video, who we are to others and who we believe to be who we believe. Has anybody watched themselves on a video and gone, oh, no, that's not me? I know I certainly have. What I've thought about is irrelevant, but yeah, I've looked at a video and gone, flipping heck, is that me? I sound like a chipmunk, or you sound like a chipmunk right now. This is known as Johari's window. Those are only two of the windows. Who the world sees, it's the blind spot and the video that are the areas that impact underperformance. And it's for us to raise awareness around these areas so that you as an individual, as an employee, an employer to address it and help an employee, or even just in your private life, if you can start raising awareness around these two areas, make a massive positive impact to your life as a whole. Another area that in the workplace that is largely misunderstood and not really taken into consideration is what motivates us. And I'm not talking about money motivated or holiday motivated. I'm now talking about what drives a person to achieve a goal, either to have or to get something. Is it the fear of not having or the joy of getting? Is it the fear of being last or the joy of being first? Are you benefits motivated or consequences motivated? Companies don't ask these questions. They just throw some stuff out there and then just expect all the staff to follow. We're all different. Because if we were all the same, we'd all be robotic. And how much fun would there be in that? Try motivating a consequence-motivated person to do something with the benefits of achieving the task of either a goal or whatever. Conversely, try motivating a benefits-motivated person to do something with consequences of not achieving the said goal or task. That's really like pushing a boulder up a steep hill. If you want to motivate somebody, motivate them in the way that they are motivated. I know that I am benefits motivated. I know that my children are consequence motivated. So for me to tell one of my children the pleasure and the joy of what they will get if they do something is lost. They don't do it. Now, because I'm benefits motivated, if I keep using my filters to motivate them, nothing's going to happen. Conversely, if they try to motivate me to do something by telling me what I'm not going to have, it's not going to make a blind bit of difference. And this is where, when we start talking about people speaking their language, there is so much more to this. This is just some of the things to consider in the workplace. Most people have never considered whether they're benefits or consequence driven. You can be a bit of both. You can be for, after. There's various different mixtures of those. But knowing that could be useful. And even as a parent, knowing that with your children, that can make a massive difference to you. So if you take these areas into consideration, when a company starts looking at underperformance, on the back of underperformance comes absenteeism. And I'm not saying that absenteeism isn't high because of maybe sickness, maybe actual physical health. You know, I can be quite controversial here because a lot of what our mind speaks itself through our body. And I know this to be true from what I've seen over 12 years. I've seen people physically heal when they get rid of some of the negative stuff that is going on in their head. And I'm not, you know what, if your leg gets chopped off, no amount of conversation is going to sew it back on. You're going to need a doctor. And I'm 100% with that. There are some things like anxiety, depression, all of these different things that if you get rid of those and you get rid of the root cause of what started that and actually, instead of transactionally distracting from it, cope in it or managing it, unfortunately, there are so many things out there that allow you to do that. How do you cope with the situation? When that trigger comes back, that coping mechanism might not be strong enough. Management. How many times have we heard of anger management? Manage your anger. Absolutely. What happens when you can't manage your anger? or distracting. I don't know, go and stand out in the rain and whistle, I don't know, God Save the Queen, whatever you want. When you come back through any one of those modalities, the problems are still sitting there. The number of times I've spoken to people, the emotions are still, I can still feel them in here. So some other trigger is going to pull it out. What we want to do is get rid of those negative emotions completely. And those are the emotions that are stopping us in the workplace, stopping us from underperforming. But a lot of people don't know that. And even if they did, they wouldn't know what to do with it. There is something that you can do, and that's what emotional transition coaching does. Taking care of employees is much of a responsibility as it is of the employee to do the best of the job that they've come on to do. It's a two-way street. And a lot of employers disregard this. Employees disregard their employers too. It is definitely a two-way street. So treat your employee well, and your employee will treat you well. Look at it another way. If you treated your partner the way you treat your staff as an employer, would they stay with you? If you treated your friends the way you treated your staff, would your friends stay? And exactly in the same direction, the opposite direction, if your staff treated the partners the way they treated their employer, would their partners stay? As with their friends stay if they treated them? Would you employ you? That's definitely something worth considering. If we don't see our video in our blind spot, we will always live in a world of blame and judgment. It's always someone else's fault. Boss is horrible, my friends are miserable, my partner doesn't understand, and the list can go on forever. At some point, we all, employers, employees, mothers, fathers, friends, brothers, sisters, we all need to realize that the meaning of our communication is the response that we get. If something or someone brushes you, instead of pointing a finger outwards, ask yourself, what is unresolved in me that is causing whatever it is to brush me, to annoy me, to upset me? My grandmother always said, remember this, when you point a finger, remember there are always three pointing back at you. She was a wise woman. I now point with a whole hand. Kidding. So let's have a look at something else, the cycles of learning and the cycles of competencies. Because as you know, as we grow up from birth, we go through all of these cycles with everything that we learn, all right? Some of us will go through all 4 stages, some won't. It just depends on whether what you're learning is something that you have a particular interest in or not. So the first level that we go through is what we call unconscious incompetence. I know that's a mouthful. Certainly not to be had after a glass of wine. And what does that actually mean? It means you don't know what you don't know. Or that you don't know, actually. Conscious incompetence, you've become aware that you lack a particular skill or knowledge. The third step is conscious competence. This means that you've learned something, but you still have to think about it in order to do it. And then the fourth stage is unconscious competence. So you've learned something and you know it so well, you just don't have to think about it when you're doing it. So even when you think of when you learned to drive a car, you get to the point of unconscious competence where you drive a car and you don't even have to think about it. And what this shows is that as we learn through these cycles, if you have negative emotions and the emotions are maybe impaired or compromised, we're not going to be able to access some of this information. And you might not even get through stages 1 through 4 because there's something that's blocking you. You get to a point sometimes where, you drive in your car, you are unconsciously competent and yet you just can't seem to do it. There's something blocking you. I guarantee you, if you stop for 5 seconds, you'll find that there's something emotional going on inside that's not positive. There is a massive value in being able to recognize that there may be other issues to consider when you work with underperformance, which could ultimately address and ultimately lead to absenteeism. More importantly, being able to address these issues in-house, in the workplace, creating a better work-life balance, reduces underperformance and absenteeism, thereby increasing turnover. Literally a win-win for all. Our staff feel better about themselves, the company does a lot better. Staff are going to definitely feel a lot better about themselves then as well. So it's also worth recognizing that absenteeism is not always about underperformance. Just as a sideline, emotional transition coaching can help on both sides of that spectrum. Now, emotional transition coaching was placed by the professor of the University of Central Lancashire as bridging the gap between performance coaching and therapy. So it's a coaching process with a therapeutic benefit. Okay? So regardless of whether you're in your personal life or whether you are working, this works across the board. So imagine your life as a river, okay, and as it's meandering along its way, heading for its conclusion, it flows over pebbles and stuff, and doesn't necessarily make much of a difference to the flow. Then it comes across a boulder right in the middle of its path, and now makes a decision either to go around it or to go over it. And it will take the path of least resistance, as we do, and continues on its path. This boulder will certainly impact the flow of the river, interrupting the free flow. Depending on the size of the boulder and where it's situated, will determine the size of the impact, the amount of splashing, the divide in the water, the peak, the trough, all that kind of stuff. There are a number of possibilities that could happen. And much like the boulder in this river, negative emotions do the same, impacting the free flow of your life, our lives. And depending on the size of the boulder, this too will determine the dependence on the size of the impact. The boulder really is a representation of the emotional blocks from the past, most of which you may not even have an idea of where they came from or even that they are there. So the prime directive of the unconscious is to keep you physically, emotionally, and mentally safe. Coming back from what I was saying earlier, we have over 2 million pieces of information that come into our nervous system a day, per second. That's around 80 gigabytes a day. Now that's a pretty massive supercomputer by every stretch of the imagination. We can, however, only process consciously 134 bits per second. That is a tiny little speck on the biggest page that you can imagine. And this information passes through the filters. There are a number of those, and it's not time and place. If you want to know more, we can go down that road. But you can only take in 134 bits of that 2 million per second. So how might you conceptualize? I don't know if I've created that word myself, but anyway, a new word for Scrabble, conceptualize. How do we do that? Right, so here's the thing. Can you think of the little toe on your left foot? Until you thought of that, you were not consciously aware of your little toe, but it was always there. Now, if it was hurt, you would have thought about it all the time. And this is part of the filtration system of our brain. You only are aware, 134 bits is only the part that you find necessary for you to use right now. Another example, like I said earlier, is the fear of heights. This again is how the unconscious works. I don't know, let's imagine a parent going on holiday and go to the Grand Canyon and very excitedly, come on kids, let's go and have a look at the edge. Scoop your child up, off you go to the edge, extolling the amazing benefits of looking over the edge. The child, however, on the other end is definitely not up for that. Okay. Now the child's kicking and screaming. The internal environment, which is your unconscious, hasn't quite caught up with the external environment, the conscious. So the child is kicking and screaming as you boisterously, come on, you'll be all right. and take the child to the edge of the Grand Canyon. Now, the unconscious at this point is going to kick in and go, whoa, we're not going to do this again. And then it makes you afraid of heights. So the next time you're faced with heights, you might really want to go to the top of the Eiffel Tower, but you're going, not going to happen. It's like me, I won't go bungee jumping. Don't know where it is, have no intention of fixing that. But the unconscious puts into place the fear so that you don't let yourself down. Emotional transition coaching works to restore this balance between the internal and the external environment. Now, why is that relevant? Well, the unconscious doesn't stop working just because you're at work or just because you're at home. So when work says, look, leave home life at the front door of the office, and home says, leave work at the front door of the house, it's not going to work because the unconscious is just all one big laugh. So it triggers whether you're at home, triggers whether you're at work, because you can't leave it. So as another example, how do we gather these emotions? How do we get them to the point where they create these trigger drivers and behaviors? So a mother's in a park with a 2-year-old toddler, gives the toddler an ice cream, toddler drops the ice cream, and in that moment, the mother needs to make a decision. Is this salvageable? Can I give this back to the child? Or is it going to have to be trashed because it's not good for the kid? The mother draws on all of her experience, and now let's say for this example, mom says, no, it's not going to work, got to throw it away. Okay? The child now has a perception of what's going on. The mother wasn't trying to be horrible. In fact, the mother was being really nice so that the child doesn't get sick. Okay? The child doesn't know that. So outside of the child's awareness, the child, for this example, let's say, felt sad because mom threw her ice cream away. And also in that moment is also going to come up with the belief, maybe, I don't know, I'm not good enough. I wasn't good enough to be given the ice cream back, so I dropped it. Okay? So now let's sort of jump ahead, maybe out at about 8 or 10, child's at school and falls out with best friend. Child comes home and says, I fell out with my best friend. I'm really sad. And in that moment can also feel that she wasn't good enough maybe for her friend. Now, these emotions start with their birthing emotions that create what are called friendship circles. Like, come on, join our little friendship circle. So we start that. Now let's roll on to maybe 18 or 19. This young adult is now considering college, applies to a few colleges, doesn't quite get into the ideal choice, first choice. Feels a bit sad, and there again now starts to have negative self-talk, doesn't feel good enough, couldn't get into the college that they wanted to get into. Okay, come on, join our little friendship circle. Another one of, I don't feel good enough. We're feeling sad. This little friendship circle is starting to grow. All right. After college, our young adult now applies for some jobs, gets one, and is working along happily, feeling confident, and everything's really ticking along nicely. This young adult then is faced with a challenge and has to perform this task. And this task reminds the child, this adult, of the past. All of these different things, however insignificant they were, they all packed a bit of a punch. And now, underperformance is kicking in. And actually, it's got nothing to do with the knowledge of skill of what this child, this young person has learned. Whether it's a young adult just starting at work or, like me, later years, doesn't matter. We're in that class. As we grow, our life is to learn and for us to do this journey of life. And so these things are going to come in. This doesn't need to be in the area of holistic mental health. It needs to be in the area of emotional transition coaching, where we can get rid of those. Because that doesn't mean there's anything about you. It just means that that's what's happened. Now, there might not be any physical danger, but there would be an emotional danger. And that's when the unconscious kicks in and goes, nah, these are the boulders. We're not going to do that. This is what is then deemed to be underperformance. If you feel like you are being personally attacked, I can tell you now you'll identify that. And depending on the amount of negativity that is surrounding this issue, and that will depend on the amount of emotion, and that will then depend on the level of response that you do. So in order to be less reactive and be more responsive, we need to remove those negative emotions that are surrounding the problem. You know, the hotter the potato, the deeper it runs. Conventional coaching can't change that on a transformational way. So what we look to do is to get rid of those negative emotions. We neutralize those negative emotions with emotional transition coaching. That's what we do. And we see a lot of this. We did see a lot of this with PTSD when I was working with a lot of that. The problem that is not, if it's never resolved, a lot of them came to us, they had nowhere left to go. They couldn't work, their personal life was in rag order, and it was all based around negative emotions. And we found when we started getting rid of those negative emotions, their lives changed around. And wasn't work-related. It did stop him from doing what he wanted to do. We had a gentleman that came to us with severe PTSD. I'm going to keep it very vague for obvious reasons. He was in the Falklands, and 50% of his platoon died on the day. Until the time that we spoke with this gentleman, 49% of the remaining 50% had committed suicide, and he was in the mental health. And he was in the system. They had tried everything with him, everything. I know this story is true because I was part of his journey. And he came to us. We put him through emotional transition coaching, is what we do. And the short version today, at the time, he had no relationship with his children. He hadn't eaten food in nearly 6 years. He was living on literally on beer. He had no relationship with his ex-wife. He literally had no relationship with anything. And the mental health system literally was just waiting for him to die. They did not know. When they spoke to us afterwards, they said, we did not know what else to do. We'd done everything that we could. Today, he is got a good relationship with his children, good relationship with his ex-wife. He's in a new relationship. He is living in his own home. And the biggest part of that story is he has been signed off the mental health register. He is no longer within the mental health. So I know that emotional transition coaching works, and it will work for underperformance as well. Have a happy staff, create a high turnover. An unhappy staff will create low turnover. Happy staff are loyal, and your staff don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Okay? So what we do bridges the gap between conventional coaching, performance coaching, and therapy, okay? Because the negative emotions are what is holding you back. It's an emotional issue. It doesn't mean that you can't function, you can't do what you naturally do, okay? So, having worked in holistic mental health, I would love to work with companies and enable people within the team to help those clients, okay, to help their staff to better performance. Holistic mental health is something that, I know is very out there, and I'm probably quite out there in some of the ways that I think, and yeah, it is just kind of where we're at right now. But I know what I know through my own journey. This isn't a journey of someone else said that. I know this because this is what I've done for the last 12 years. And I know that there are some things that emotional transition coaching can do. Make no mistake, there are some things that do need to go to mental health. I have no problem with that. Just give this person an opportunity to rectify it before they get a footprint. Another one of the clients that I've had working, I met her in the workplace. She, for 10 years, had suffered with depression. She had a number of suicide attempts. She tried therapy, medication, nothing worked. Coming through emotional transition coaching, 10 years on, she's not had a single day's depression. She's not even considered suicide in those 10 years. Has she had down days? Of course she has. Bet your bottom dollar she has. Just like any one of us. She's a normal human being. The root cause of that depression, though, was addressed and neutralized. Today she's happy, confident, has a busy life, and leading a full and enjoyable life. Another one of my clients lost her father 4 years ago, her mom a year ago, and her son had moved to Australia. Due to our current circumstances, she was unable to visit, well, she still is unable to visit, she's hoping next year. But that added to her a perceived loss, because her son is still alive, but the perception of she doesn't know when she's going to see him again in Australia. She was that overwhelmed with sadness, she literally could not work. She'd not really dealt with the death of her parents. We did emotional transition coaching, and she's through it. She's working. She's absolutely fine. Pills, therapy did not help. Okay. Does she have bad days and good days? Of course she does. Does she still feel sad some days? Of course she does, okay? Emotional transition coaching is not designed to take away your memories. It's designed to neutralize the negative emotions that are surrounding a problem or a memory. We worked with Hong Kong rugby's. I know I'm South African born, and I'm not great on the rules of rugby. I've seen it, but I'm not great. So, but anyway, the full team of sevens is around 12 people, and the selection pot in Hong Kong was only 13. So regardless of where the players were, bar one, they probably all had a pretty good chance of being in the squad. The players were dedicated, which was great. We've been asked to help them to get to the Olympic qualifiers. Now, as people will know, I didn't so, there were only a select number of people, obviously, that can go to the Olympics, we know this, but that selection also goes as far as the qualifiers. There are certain criteria that just even get you to get to the qualifiers. You don't just go there. So by any standards, that was quite a feat. We got them to the qualifiers. They made it to the qualifiers, they were in the finals. I tell you what, I was so happy. I was like a mother with their flipping children. It was crazy. But as I said, I'm not great on the rules and regulations, but I did recognise, for me personally, this is my opinion, that Hong Kong was cheated out of their place at the Olympics. Let's just say that the team they played against, I'm going to say it, Japan, they were one of the first out of the Olympics, and that was because they weren't meant to be there. Hong Kong was meant to be there. That basically was more proof for me that emotional transition coaching works, okay? And it works in any area. That was pure performance in elite sports. I also know of another coach, a Canadian coach, who worked with the skeleton team. He knocked off, for me it was like a really small amount of seconds, because it was point of a second. It was enough of a time gap for them to go for gold. We also worked with a skier who didn't want to come off the ski start block, and through working with the stuff that he'd learned through us, he got her off, and she went on to get, it was either silver or gold, but pretending in life I could remember which. The fact remained that she got a medal at the Olympics. And that's performance. So if that's what we can do in an Olympic arena, what can we do in an organisation? How can an organisation go on to do these different things? Emotional coaching is the missing link to performance coaching, and coaching as an overall. Helping to understand and neutralise these negative emotions makes a massive difference. It just adds to one's coaching, and bridging that gap gives you the opportunity to make a difference in someone's life permanently getting rid of it. A watch is made up of many cogs, big ones, small ones, fat ones, thin ones, pink ones, brown ones, yellow ones, doesn't matter. You just need one of those teeth in that cog to break. Doesn't matter which cog it is. It's not going to work. Okay. So either you're going to just put a bit of glue on it. How long will it last? Compared to if we actually repair it, how long will that last? So in conclusion of what I'm saying, salesman goes into a salesman in the shop really wants to impress his boss, and a customer comes in and he goes on to sell to the customer. Oh, you want a shirt? And he puts a shirt and a suit and all this, and he tallies it up, and it's £1,000. And he says to the guy, yeah, off you go. Paid his £1,000 and off he goes. And he goes to his boss and he says, do you know, just sold £1,000 worth of merchandise. The boss says, that's great. What made you stop selling? He said, well, it was £1,000. He said, yeah, but you never gave him any socks or cufflinks or... He said, yeah, but he spent £1,000. The question is, what did make him stop? These are the things that the past comes in to visit you on. And this is where we learn. And it's generally at these kind of points that people start looking for coaching. So if you'd like to know more, I could go on for good, but time is up. If you'd like to know more, please visit us on Stand 3888, Something Simple Coaching, or just make contact with me. I'd love to chat to you, get to know more about what you want. There's a Calendly link on there if you want. There's a brochure to download for both sides of what I do. And thank you very much for listening to me today. And I look forward to maybe chatting in the future.
Thank you, Davy. Thank you for being with us.